Raidcor's mandibles clicked in quiet satisfaction as his flagship, the Obliterator's Wing, hovered at the edge of what the Zoldran Dominion had designated a minor star system. The swirling mist of cosmic dust around them lit up the blackness of space with faint glimmers, and to his experienced gaze, there was nothing here that suggested even the slightest threat. The intelligence reports he had received over the last few cycles stated that this system, called Sol by its inhabitants, featured one habitable planet that was technologically primitive. The planet in question, Earth, had been observed from a distance for nearly an entire orbital period. Energy readings, minimal. Military presence, negligible. Population, large but seemingly disorganized. Best of all, they had not detected any signs of faster-than-light capability, confirming the widely held theory that they were at best a pre-FTL civilization. All the markers suggested an easy conquest that would add another subject species to the Zoldran Dominion's growing list of conquests. Raidcor had overseen the subjugation of dozens of worlds, and he expected no complications here. He flicked a claw across the holographic display in front of him, highlighting the third planet from the star. "Commander," said Talon Reth, his second-in-command, stepping forward with a crisp salute. "Long-range scans confirm minimal orbital defenses. We're reading a few satellites of basic design, a handful of space stations with rudimentary life support, and one larger station around their moon. Beyond that, nothing indicates advanced technology. Their major sources of power appear to be nuclear fission and some form of planetary-based reactor technology using fossilized carbon compounds. It's almost quaint. Shall we proceed with standard approach?" Raidcor ran his eyes over the displayed statistics. The humans, as they called themselves, had subdivided their planet into various nations, but in the last few decades, they had formed something that intelligence suggested was a united council for planetary governance. If that was true, it made communications far simpler. By Zoldran tradition, an ultimatum was always delivered: surrender to the might of the Dominion or face destruction. He had never known a species that put up real resistance once the first wave of punishment rained down on them. There had been uprisings here and there, but the Dominion had crushed all significant defiance with ease. He nodded at Talonreth. "Yes, standard approach. Triangulate planetary communication frequencies, broadcast our presence, and demand immediate submission. Inform them they have one planetary rotation to comply. If they refuse, or if they fail to respond, we begin the orbital bombardment of their major cities." He paused and let his gaze roam across the bridge. "I expect no complications, but remain on guard. Even a dying creature can lash out." The alien bridge hummed with efficiency, every console manned by an officer or specialist who had spent a lifetime training for subjugation campaigns. The Zoldran were a proud, martial species, their entire history revolving around conquest. Raidcor felt a surge of that pride welling in his chest. This would be another swift, decisive victory for the Dominion, the sort that would secure resources, territory, and possibly some fresh labor forces. The humans might prove good for menial tasks. Above all, their world was said to be rich in water, arable land, and valuable minerals. A perfect addition to the Empire. The communication specialist confirmed the wideband broadcast, and Talonreth oversaw the final checks. Within moments, the demand for surrender flooded every radio wave, television broadcast, and digital network on Earth. "Inhabitants of the planet you call Earth, the Zoldran Dominion has arrived to claim jurisdiction over your world. You will submit, or you will be destroyed. You have one planetary rotation to comply." That was the formal script used by the Dominion whenever they encountered a new civilization. Variations were sometimes made, but the core message remained the same: bend the knee or die. At first, all seemed as expected. The humans would either panic or attempt to negotiate from a position of weakness. The standard result was a trembling request for more time. Sometimes the local governments tried to appear strong, but it never lasted. Raidcor allowed himself a moment of genuine boredom. Conquests like these were the lifeblood of the Empire, but they rarely brought the excitement of a true challenge. He recalled a time many years ago, as a younger officer, when they had faced a species that had at least partially withstood the Dominion's initial incursion. That had been exhilarating, but the end result was always inevitable. He poured himself a small glass of triash, a pungent beverage from his homeworld, and swirled it slowly, watching the swirling patterns of light in the holographic displays. Talon. Reth gave a curt nod. We've completed the broadcast, Commander. Now we wait. The reply came far sooner than expected. Usually, it took at least half of the allotted time for a unified planet to organize any form of coherent answer. Yet, a mere 6 hours in, they received a direct response from the planet's main seat of government. Raid Kor allowed himself a bemused grin as he settled back in his command chair and gestured for the communications specialist to patch it through to the main view screen. A woman appeared, human by all accounts, with dark brown skin and eyes that shone with an unsettling calm. Her hair was worn short, and she wore a simple uniform displaying the insignia of some sort of planetary council. The translation software quickly brought her words into the Zoldran language, though she also seemed to speak in a universal manner, as if addressing an unknown audience. Zoldran Dominion, she said, my name is Secretary General Alina Okafor of the United Earth Council. We have received your ultimatum. She paused for a beat, and Raid Kor leaned forward. He expected the usual stammering. Yet nothing in her face suggested fear. Our answer, she continued, is no. A ripple of surprise passed through the bridge. Raid Kor straightened in his seat, setting his glass of triash down so abruptly that it nearly tipped. They didn't even ask for more time, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. They refused outright. The woman on screen continued, apparently able to see them even if they couldn't see her fully. You threaten our planet with destruction, believing we cannot defend ourselves. You have scanned our basic nuclear capabilities and deemed them insufficient. You have concluded that we possess no FTL technology, no advanced weaponry that can pierce your shields. In short, you believe we are vulnerable. Her expression remained almost maddeningly serene. I am here to inform you that you have profoundly underestimated humanity. With a flick of his hand, Raid Kor signaled the technician to shift the view screen to a sensor overlay. He wanted to see if the humans were broadcasting anything else, sending hidden signals, or powering up some trifling weapon. So far, they had done nothing to alarm the Dominion's instruments. Talon Reth looked equally puzzled. Secretary General Okafor's voice rang out again. You demanded we surrender or be destroyed. We decline. If it is war you want, then war you shall have. And so that our position is clear, we invite you to observe a small demonstration of what you have overlooked. Her image vanished. The view screen reverted to a wide-angle shot of Earth, rotating peacefully below the Dominion's ships. There was an unnerving hush, as if the entire system had taken a breath. Then a spate of alarms began to shriek across the Obliterator's wing. The sensor specialist at the far side of the bridge shouted that they were detecting multiple launches, not from Earth's surface, but from the far side of its moon. Raid Kor stood, gaze snapping to Talonreth. Report, he commanded, his voice low and urgent. Commander, we're seeing high-velocity projectiles being accelerated by what appear to be magnetic rails, hidden beneath the lunar surface or in crater installations. Their mass and speed, they're enormous. Our shields are calibrated primarily against energy weapons. These are kinetic rods traveling at hypervelocity. Talonreth's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and alarm. Raid Kor barked an order to engage evasive maneuvers. The Dominion had indeed faced kinetic weapons before, but rarely deployed with such efficiency. Typically, less advanced species utilized nuclear rockets or laser bursts, neither of which had proven particularly effective against Zoldran shield technology. The Empire's shield harmonics were designed to diffuse energy-based attacks or track slower-moving objects. But these rods were coming in so fast that even partial glancing hits would cause catastrophic damage. Recalibrate the shield resonance, Raid Kor shouted, knowing full well it might be impossible to do so quickly. The front viewer showed streaks of light now, fast approaching lines of golden sparks. The first rods impacted with 2 Dominion frigates that were ahead of the main cluster. Both frigates lit up in blossoms of fire, the rods piercing their protective fields and smashing into the hulls with unstoppable momentum. Debris scattered across the black void, and the entire formation reeled. Talon Reth reeled back from his console. "Commander, the Horizon Spear and the Lancer's Edge are gone." His words were tight with horror and shock. They were destroyed instantly. Raid Kor felt a surge of anger. How could these primitive creatures have built something capable of delivering such destructive force under his scans? He gave the order to return fire, directing the starboard batteries on the nearest Zoldran destroyers to incinerate the launch sites. Yet, the moment they tried, they encountered some form of interference. Great arcs of energy shielded the moon's surface. More rods launched from other orbital positions. Then alarms flared again as readings indicated a massive energy spike near Earth's own orbital ring. More projectiles inbound. Talon Reth shouted, "We're trying to scramble interceptors, but they're not fast enough. The rods have minimal electronic components, minimal thermal signatures. Our targeting systems are partially blind." Another handful of rods slammed into the Dominion formation, tearing through hull plating that was never intended to protect against such relentless physical impacts. Raid Kor watched in horror as one of his best cruisers, the Dominion's Roar, split in half and spiraled away with secondary explosions. In the space of mere minutes, the unstoppable juggernaut that was the Zoldran fleet had been crippled by a barrage from a species they deemed hopelessly behind in technology. His communications officer turned in shock, voice trembling. "Commander, the United Earth Council is hailing us again." Raid Kor was tempted to refuse them out of sheer humiliation, but he knew it would be unwise to ignore. "On screen," he said in a clipped tone. Once more, the woman from before, Secretary General Alina Okafor, appeared. This time, Admiral Marcus Chun stood beside her, his expression implacable. Raid Kor noticed the man's uniform was adorned with insignia that presumably indicated high rank among Earth's defensive forces. The Admiral spoke first. "Commander Raid Kor, we have disabled a portion of your fleet." This was, as the Secretary General Okafor stated, a demonstration. "We possess far more destructive weaponry than kinetic rods, but those serve to illustrate our point. You have violated Earth's sovereignty and threatened our entire species. Our response is that you shall not find us so easily conquered." Okafor's gaze was as calm as before, but there was a steely edge in her voice. "We offer you a single chance to withdraw from our planet space. Return to your territory, convey our message to your leaders, and concede that Earth will not be subjugated." 1,000 thoughts roiled through Raid Kor's mind in that instant. Pride, fury, confusion. He realized the scale of his miscalculation. Clearly, the humans had concealed their true capabilities for who knew how long, waiting for a day like this. The Dominion's analysts had assured him Earth was no threat. Now, in mere moments, he had lost multiple ships. The entire mission was on the brink of disaster. Could his battered fleet even survive a full planetary assault? He dug his claws into the arm of his command seat. A part of him yearned to keep fighting, to prove that the Dominion could not be bested by a lesser race. But the practical side recognized that a continued engagement might result in total annihilation. "We may have been overly hasty," he managed, the words tasting bitter. "We will depart from this system if you guarantee safe passage." Admiral Chun flicked a glance at Okafor, who inclined her head. "You will have it," the Secretary General answered. "Be aware that our forces will monitor your exit. Should you deviate from the course provided or attempt any form of retaliation, we will end you." The channel went dark. Raid Kor exhaled a breath he had not realized he was holding. Defeat had never tasted so vile. Around him, the bridge was bathed in red emergency lights and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry from a few damaged consoles. Some of his crew stared at him with a mixture of shock and horror, as though they could not believe their once invincible commander had just submitted to a lesser race. He stood. "Begin evacuation maneuvers for any surviving crew on our disabled vessels. Send medical teams where possible. Then we follow the withdrawal corridor they've transmitted." His voice echoed hollowly. "We're leaving. Silence reigned on the journey back to Zoldra Prime, the capital of the Dominion. The battered remains of the fleet limped through hyperspace gates, some vessels half-ruined, others missing entire sections. Raid Corps prepared the mandatory report for the Admiralty Council, wrestling with how to explain the fiasco. If any other commanding officer had returned with so catastrophic a failure, he might have been executed on the spot for incompetence. Yet the strangeness of the entire scenario gave him a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the Council would see that what had transpired was not merely a lack of preparation. They had encountered a species that defied the Dominion's entire understanding of technological progression. When the Obliterator's wing finally arrived in orbit above the blackstone spires of Zoldra Prime, Raid Corps ordered a full quarantine of the returning ships. He wanted no rumors leaking prematurely. This was a matter for the highest authorities. Summoned to the Admiralty's seat of power, a vast chamber hewn from the volcanic rock that covered much of the planet, Raid Corps found himself surrounded by the four most powerful military figures in the Dominion. Grand Admiral Tharn Nal, an imposing presence with four eyes that shone like polished obsidian, led the council. Seated beside him were strategist Vokshtal and High Commander Inira Voss, while the final seat belonged to War Minister Krothos Dar, known for his ruthlessness and commitment to the centuries-old doctrine of unstoppable conquest. None looked pleased to see Raid Corps. He knelt in the center of the chamber, the echoes of his footsteps still reverberating. On the dais above, Tharn Nal crossed his four arms and regarded Raid Corps with a harsh intensity. Commander, you departed to subjugate a pre-FTL world that our intelligence rated as a negligible threat. Yet you return with a fraction of your fleet intact, bearing tales of catastrophic losses. Explain yourself. Raid Corps activated the hollow projector built into his wrist gauntlet, allowing the central space of the chamber to fill with flickering images of the brief but devastating engagement. One by one, he showed them the sensor data on the hypervelocity rods, the previously invisible defense platforms around Earth's moon, the advanced energy patterns that suggested far more complex capabilities. He tried to convey just how comprehensively the humans had concealed their true power. As the footage concluded, War Minister Krothos Dar's mandibles twitched in anger. You allowed illusions to fool you. This was a failure of your leadership, Commander. I accept responsibility, Raid Corps began. But you must understand, they intended for US to see only what they wanted. We scanned their entire planet. We read their digital transmissions. They seemed divided, barely out of fossil fuel technology. Yet in reality, they have advanced weaponry that surpasses our conventional defenses. They utilize an unusual approach to FTL, though our data is incomplete, and they do so with remarkable efficiency. Strategist Vokshtal let out a snarl. Impossible. No species hides its achievements so thoroughly. It goes against the logical patterns we see across countless worlds. Societies flaunt their power as they reach new technological plateaus. Are you claiming an entire planet conspired for generations to mask their advancements? That appears to be exactly what they did, Raid Corps answered. His voice rang hollow in the hush of the chamber. When we threatened them, they responded without hesitation. They've presumably prepared for the eventuality of a cosmic predator, like us, arriving on their doorstep. And they are formidable. High Commander Inira Voss leaned forward. Formidable enough that you advise caution? More than caution, Raid Corps said, summoning the courage to voice the unthinkable. If we attempt another direct assault, we risk annihilation. They crippled a third of my fleet with a single volley of rods. And, based on the readings we took, that is only a fraction of their arsenal. An incredulous murmur spread through the council. Grand Admiral Tharn Nal raised a hand to silence them. So you have brought shame to the Dominion and allowed an inferior race to humiliate our forces. And now you advise we do nothing? What do you propose, Commander? Raid Corps steadied himself. They offered a path forward. They demanded we leave their system and never return with hostile intent. They want us to send representatives to negotiate the boundaries of any future contact. They spoke of potential trade or diplomatic relations. War Minister Krathos Dar gave a bark of derisive laughter. Trade? Diplomatic relations with those we sought to conquer? Ridiculous. And yet came a thoughtful voice from strategist Voxtal. This is the first time in memory that the Dominion has come across a species we could not easily subdue. Even the Arkari, who resisted us for decades, never displayed this level of cunning or concealed technology. If these humans truly have FTL capacity, they might not remain bound to their solar system. They could come for us if sufficiently provoked. A hush fell. Raidcore saw a flicker of acknowledgement in Tharn Nal's eyes. The Grand Admiral was old enough to remember a time when the Dominion had faced real threats, though not on this scale. We must not underestimate them again, Tharn Nal said slowly. And you say they are willing to speak, not simply destroy us. Fascinating. They had the advantage, and they let you leave. They said it was a demonstration of both their power and their capacity for something they call mercy, Raidcore replied. They gave me the sense that had they chosen to, they could have wiped us out. Tharn Nal turned to the others. We cannot rush blindly into another conflict. That would be madness. But nor can we simply set aside millennia of Dominion policy. Our entire civilization is built upon expansion and conquest. His eyes rested on Raidcore. Again, unblinking. Commander, you will return to their system. Not with an armada, but with a diplomatic envoy. Learn everything you can about these humans. Gauge their intentions, their strengths and weaknesses. Report back so that we may decide how to proceed. Raidcore inclined his head, relief mingling with lingering shame. He wondered if the Council's acceptance was partly due to the magnitude of his revelations, or if they saw an opportunity to manipulate the humans. Regardless, it was better than being executed for failure. I will do as you command, Grand Admiral. Soon, Raidcore found himself at the helm of a smaller ship, once named the Dominance Ascendant, but hastily rechristened the Harmony Seeker to convey a diplomatic pretense. A half-dozen escorts accompanied it, yet it was a far cry from the imposing fleet that had assaulted Earth. Raidcore could sense the tension among his crew as they re-entered the Sol system. None had forgotten how swiftly their might had been undone. Contact came at once. A crisp human voice identified itself as Captain Fiona Reyes of the Earth Diplomatic Corps vessel handshake. Raidcore found the name somewhat disconcerting, as he had studied that a handshake was a human greeting of peace. The sensors read that the handshake was far smaller than a Dominion warship, almost painfully unarmored by Zoldran standards, but the energy signatures were unusual. The handshake parted from Earth's orbit and approached in a meticulously arranged formation. Zoldran Vessel Harmony Seeker, welcome to the Sol system, came Captain Reyes's voice. We understand you're here in a diplomatic capacity. We will escort you to Europa Station near Jupiter, where the Secretary-General and Admiral Chin await you. Raidcore responded in what he hoped was a neutral tone, mindful that he was representing the Dominion in an unprecedented role. Acknowledged Captain Reyes. We come in peace. He could almost hear the faint amusement in her voice when she replied. We certainly hope so. Follow our navigational beacon. Any unauthorized scans or deviations from the flight path will be taken as a hostile act. As the Harmony Seeker advanced deeper into the system, Raidcore once more gazed upon the structures scattered among the planets and moons. Now, many of them were openly visible, no longer masked. He saw enormous shipyards orbiting Mars, advanced research facilities near the Jovian moons, and hidden bases reactivated around Saturn's rings. Every new sensor reading confirmed that the humans had been systematically preparing their entire solar system as a fortress. They had transformed what seemed like random stations and small outposts into a vast defensive network. He could not help but admire the cunning it must have taken to hide all of this until the perfect moment. Upon arriving at Europa Station, a colossal rotating ring set against the swirling backdrop of Jupiter, Raidcore led a small delegation through the docking corridor. Though the station's design was entirely different from any Dominion architecture, he noted how seamlessly it adapted to alien visitors. The gravity was maintained at a comfortable level, and the corridors were wide enough for a variety of body shapes. Guards posted in discreet positions wore Earth uniforms with small sidearms that Raid-Corps scanners detected as pulse weapons, not the usual ballistic firearms that Earth was rumored to possess in simpler times. They were ushered into a large chamber with a curved transparent wall, revealing the icy surface of Europa and Jupiter's immense, swirling storms beyond. Secretary General Alina Okafor stood waiting, flanked by Admiral Marcus Chun and a handful of other officials. Raid-Corps bowed in a gesture of respect he had practiced carefully. Secretary General, Admiral, I return as envoy of the Zoldran Dominion. Okafor took a step forward, her expression composed. Envoy Raid-Corps, we appreciate your willingness to engage in diplomacy. Admiral Chun surveyed Raid-Corps with that impenetrable gaze. Your last visit to Seoul was accompanied by an entire fleet. This time, you appear more agreeable. Raid-Corps forced his mandibles not to tighten in annoyance. Yes, Admiral. Our leadership deemed it prudent to explore less destructive paths. Okafor guided them to a circular table in the center of the chamber, inviting them to sit. The arrangement had clearly been designed to make all participants equals, without a dominating seat at the head. Raid-Corps noticed that small details, like seat angles and lighting, had been meticulously planned to put visitors at ease. He was not entirely sure he felt at ease, but it was obvious the humans wanted to display their cultural emphasis on negotiation rather than intimidation, at least now that they had already proven their military superiority. They spoke for hours, discussing the basic terms: a cessation of any Dominion aggression toward Earth or any other species in the region, Earth's demand for Dominion recognition of their sovereignty, and a structured framework for future engagement. Raid-Corps found himself constantly on guard. Every time he tried to gauge if the humans might one day make a move against the Dominion, they answered with measured language about mutual benefit and peaceful coexistence. The strangest thing of all was that some of them seemed genuinely earnest in wanting to avoid more bloodshed. Yet he also sensed that behind their politeness lay a coiled readiness to defend themselves if threatened again. Admiral Chun explained that humanity had learned from centuries of internal conflicts, culminating in a planetary unification that then dedicated itself to outward exploration. They recognized the possibility of encountering hostile extraterrestrial life. From that day onward, they quietly prepared, developing advanced technologies and scattering them across their solar system in ways that would not raise suspicion. Officially, humanity's space presence looked modest. In reality, they had an intricate, well-honed defense network. Okafor added that the reason they had not destroyed the Dominion fleet outright was a moral choice. They did not want to unleash total devastation unless absolutely necessary. That was why they only used a fraction of their capabilities, leaving the Zoldran ships damaged but not obliterated. Raid-Corps listened in silence, realizing more and more how different the humans' cultural perspective was from that of the Dominion. After 2 days of continuous talks, the humans offered to provide a limited technology exchange if the Dominion agreed to a wide non-aggression pact, not just with Earth but with any other species in the sector. Raid-Corps felt uneasy. Dominion expansion was the core of his civilization. He could not commit to halting it altogether, but he took notes, carefully sending encoded transmissions back to Zoldra Prime so the Admiralty Council could follow the progress. On the 3rd day, a minor crisis erupted. A band of Dominion hardliners back on Zoldra Prime attempted to seize control of the Council, denouncing any talk of peace as treachery. Word reached Raid-Corps through a scrambled comm that the coup attempt had been quashed, but not without bloodshed. High Commander Inira Voss had died in the fighting, while Grand Admiral Tharn Nal barely survived an assassination attempt. The Dominion was tearing itself apart, uncertain how to handle an opponent they could not easily crush. This development shifted the negotiations dramatically. Okafor and Chun pressed him for assurances that any agreement they reached would not be overturned by extremist elements back home. Raid-Corps, for the first time in his life, struggled to maintain composure in front of an alien species that had proven more stable in the face of a monumental conflict than his own empire. Eventually, the Council regained control, and Grand Admiral Tharn, NAL, sent a direct message endorsing the diplomatic mission. Raidcore relayed to the humans that the Dominion was prepared to sign an initial accord of non-aggression specific to Earth and its allies in the sector, with a broader reevaluation of the Dominion's conquest doctrine pending. Admiral Chin's expression was guarded, but there was a flicker of relief. "We understand ancient traditions do not vanish overnight," he said, "but let this be a first step. We have no interest in punishing your people if they truly desire peaceful coexistence." Raidcore thought back to the day that Earth's kinetic rods rained down upon his fleet, unleashing devastation the likes of which he had never seen. The entire concept of peaceful coexistence was alien to the Dominion, whose ethos centered on forcibly bringing other species under their rule. Yet looking at these humans, he saw a mixture of fortitude and mercy. He silently wondered if the Dominion could adapt fast enough, or if a day of reckoning would come when Earth would decide enough was enough and unleash a second demonstration with far more finality. An agreement was reached. Both sides tentatively signed a treaty that recognized Earth's sovereignty and forced the Dominion to declare that Earth's star system was off-limits to conquest. Additionally, they agreed to exchange ambassadors, with each side opening a small diplomatic outpost on the other's world. The humans specified that, in time, they would invite the Zoldran to learn from them, to share in scientific ventures that did not involve militaristic expansion. Raidcore had trouble imagining how such an exchange would truly work, but the official ceremony marked the first time in recorded Dominion history that they had been compelled into a peace treaty with a species they had intended to dominate. The short transit from Europa Station to Earth gave Raidcore and his small retinue a chance to see how humans lived on their home planet, this time as welcome guests rather than invaders. A specialized atmospheric shuttle took them from orbit to a base near Earth's largest ocean. He glanced out a viewport, seeing sprawling cities, farmland, and sparkling seas. The planet teemed with life, far more diverse than the austere landscapes on Zoldra Prime. He recalled reading that humans had fought each other for centuries, scarring the planet with wars. Yet the surface looked peaceful now, with signs of advanced infrastructure coexisting with vast green spaces. Secretary General Okafor accompanied them to a newly constructed facility designated for interstellar dialogues. Raidcore encountered crowds of curious onlookers who had come to see the first official alien envoy to set foot on Earth. He glimpsed camera drones hovering discreetly overhead, recording the event for a presumably global audience. The humans' approach to publicity fascinated him. Instead of hiding their differences or stoking fear, Earth's government was apparently encouraging the public to view this event as a milestone. He found it surreal that 3 cycles prior, his fleet had been on the brink of bombarding these same cities. A formal reception took place in a grand hall that combined sleek, modern architecture with symbolic touches from various Earth cultures. He tasted human foods, an array of flavors so different from the bland rations of warships. He listened to pieces of music that spanned from calm orchestral to driving electronic beats. He even tried to answer a few gently posed questions from journalists, carefully avoiding any revelations that might compromise the Dominion's overall strategic capabilities. Admiral Chun made a brief speech, praising the resilience of Earth citizens, acknowledging the sorrowful losses on both sides of the conflict, and emphasizing that war was never Earth's preference. He ended by quoting a phrase from Earth's distant past: "If you desire peace, prepare for war." We did, and we hope the Zoldran Dominion has learned that war does not always favor the seemingly stronger side. Back on Zoldra Prime, the Dominion had its own storm to weather. While some admirals saw sense in forging a truce, particularly those who valued survival over pride, others erupted in fury at the notion of bowing to a lesser race. But in the face of the data, in the face of the humiliating losses, many had to admit that continuing a conflict would invite a catastrophic defeat. The Empire had never encountered a species that could so completely defy the Dominion's expectations. For all their talk of unstoppable conquest, no one wanted to risk a war of extinction against an unknown force that had already displayed terrifying potential. Within a year, small but notable changes took root. A permanent Earth embassy opened on Zoldra Prime, staffed by humans who carefully navigated the undercurrents of Dominion society. Likewise, the Dominion set up a mission on Earth, with Raykor named as head envoy, a role he never imagined he would hold. Slowly, other member species of the Dominion began to hear rumors of Earth. Some even came forward to request Earth's help if the Dominion refused to end oppression on their worlds. Thus, the Dominion found itself, for the first time, facing a question of identity. Could an empire built on conquest transform when confronted with a foe that would neither allow itself to be conquered nor stoop to conquer the Dominion in return? Grand Admiral Tharn, NAL, privately confided to Raykor that he had begun re-evaluating the strategic doctrines. If Earth had advanced so far in secret, might there be other races in the galaxy doing the same? Could the Dominion's approach to expansion become a liability, inviting a coalition of hidden powers that would eventually topple them? Raykor did not have answers, but he recognized that the humans were forcing a paradigm shift in Zoldran thinking. Much of the Dominion resisted. Fanatical factions staged occasional attacks on the New Earth Embassy, calling for renewed warfare. But the cooler heads in the Council recognized that Earth was always watching, always ready to deploy that fearsome technology if provoked. Gradually, the notion spread among Zoldran citizens that there might be a better way, one that did not revolve around forcibly subjugating others. The existence of Earth and its moral stance on warfare was a living example of how advanced military might could coexist with a deliberate choice not to use it for conquest. 3 years after the initial confrontation, Raykor stood at an observation window aboard the collaborative venture, a newly commissioned joint vessel that symbolized the uneasy but real partnership taking root between Earth and the Dominion. This vessel had been designed by Dominion engineers, incorporating human shield and propulsion techniques. It was not a warship, but rather a long-range exploration and research craft. The cargo hold was filled with scientific instruments from both species, intended to investigate uncharted regions of space beyond the known frontiers. He gazed at the planet below, Zoldra Prime. From orbit, it looked smaller than Earth, covered in sweeping black deserts and glimmering obsidian ranges. Strange how seeing his own homeworld from above made him realize how fragile it truly was. For centuries, the Dominion had believed in its invincibility. Now he understood that every world, no matter how formidable, could be vulnerable if it refused to adapt to changing realities. Secretary General Okafor's voice interrupted his reverie. She was standing at his side, also looking down at the planet. "It's beautiful in its own way," she said. "Your people have a heritage that spans millennia. It must not be easy to face a transformation of this magnitude." Raykor inclined his head. "Many among us are still in denial. They yearn for the old ways. But the truth is that we could not survive a prolonged conflict with Earth, and the Council knows it. More than that, some are beginning to see that cooperation might yield more than conquest ever did." Okafor's lips curved in a faint smile. "It's a journey we humans took a long time to learn ourselves. Overcoming our own internal divisions required centuries of turmoil. We never wanted war among the stars to be the continuation of that old pattern. But we prepared for the worst, as you learned." He let out a small breath. "Yes, we did. I still remember that first barrage of rods, how unstoppable they seemed. It changed my perspective. Even after the initial shock, I believed your species would demand we become your subjects. Instead, you offered terms, offered diplomacy. That was almost more shocking than the weapons themselves." Okafor studied him for a moment. "Mercy can be more terrifying than wrath, envoy, because it forces one to confront the question, if we were spared, then why?" He nodded slowly. "Exactly. We never expected an adversary that could destroy us, but chose not to. It shook the foundations of our worldview. Now I find myself in a role that defies everything I once stood for. I was a conqueror, Secretary General. Now I'm a diplomat, forging alliances." When the station chimed an alert signaling that the vessel was ready to depart for a new mission, Raykor and Okafor made their way to the main briefing room. There, They met with an integrated team of humans and Zoldran scientists, all preparing for a joint expedition beyond the frontier systems. Many of these scientists spoke excitedly about discovering new phenomena or new civilizations, talking not of conquest, but of cooperation and mutual learning. Raidcore noticed that not all of them were from Earth. Some were from species that had once been under Dominion rule, now given a chance for a voice in this new collaborative effort. Admiral Chun, present by HoloLink, greeted them. His firm voice resonated in the chamber. The collaborative venture's mission is twofold: exploration and bridge building. Let it stand as a testament to what can be achieved when even longtime enemies find common cause. We have intelligence suggesting there may be other powers at play in this region of space. Be vigilant, but remember, we choose war only as a last resort. Should we meet new species, our first act is to reach out in peace. Raidcore heard the unspoken corollary. If war comes, Earth would not hesitate to utilize everything in its arsenal. The memory of the Dominion's devastation lingered. But in that moment, he also felt a flicker of something new, something that made him believe his species could indeed change. Perhaps the future of the Dominion lay not in subjugation, but in forging partnerships. He returned to the observation deck as the collaborative venture disengaged from the orbital docks. With a final flare of its newly installed engines, it soared away from Zoldra Prime, heading into the uncharted darkness. The vessel's design was an amalgam of Earth engineering and Dominion architecture, a symbol of union. Through the transparent viewing panels, Raidcore watched the swirling stars, mindful that many sets of eyes, human and Zoldran alike, were watching him, too. He closed his eyes for a moment, recalling the fateful words that had ended the first broadcast from Earth. You chose war, and now we will show you how it's won. In that single moment of memory, he felt the full gravity of how the humans had redefined that concept. They had shown that winning a war did not always mean destroying an enemy. Sometimes it meant transforming them, offering a path that led to more than just conquest or capitulation. It was a victory far more profound than any Raidcore had ever known. Though the Dominion remained a formidable force, its thirst for expansion had been tempered by the humbling realization that out there in the vast cosmos, others might lie hidden, just as Earth had been, prepared for the day an invader arrived. The humans had taught them that arrogance in underestimating one's adversary could be the worst mistake of all. Moreover, they had taught them that war could be won by forging new alliances, bridging gaps that once seemed insurmountable. Raidcore placed a hand on the glass, gazing at the infinite stretch of stars. A new chapter was unfolding for his people, one that might eventually lead to the Dominion evolving into something more balanced. Perhaps, in time, the Zoldran Dominion would be spoken of not as conquerors, but as collaborators. Such a shift would require years, even generations, but it had already begun. All because on a distant blue planet, a civilization had chosen to hide its formidable power until the moment it had to reveal it, then used that power not for annihilation, but for forging an unexpected peace. They had forced the Dominion to ask the hardest question of all: what does it mean to truly win a war? And through that very question, they had achieved a triumph greater than conquest. They had paved the way for a future in which the Dominion might stand beside them, rather than kneel before or tower above. In the silent corridors of the collaborative venture, as the stars beckoned them onward, Raidcore knew that Earth's final words had become the first words of a new era. Fleet Commander Adrath Vol leaned against the cracked viewport, his usually upright, disciplined posture weighed down by exhaustion. For 7 long years, the Moritz Confederation had fought a war that seemed unwinnable against the Kargath Empire, an empire driven by brutal efficiency, advanced weaponry, and centuries of carefully honed military tradition. Adrath's uniform bore the scars of countless battles: a singed collar from that ambush at Durance Belt, a silver star pinned crookedly to his chest in honor of a costly victory that no one really wanted to remember. Through the viewport, he saw debris fields drifting silently in space, a graveyard of battered ships from both sides, evidence of the Confederation's desperate struggle to survive. Inside the flagship's command chamber, lights flickered intermittently as power systems rerouted to keep essential functions online. The Confederation's resources had run frighteningly thin. Only a handful of capital ships remained, and the dire state of the Confederation's ground forces left entire planets barely defended. Morale had hit rock bottom. Adrath pressed a gloved hand to the glass and exhaled. He remembered a time, years ago, when Amoric's people had believed in a swift triumph over Kargath aggression. Yet here they were, whittled down to a fraction of their once imposing fleet, living day to day by emergency rations and borrowed hope. Conference rooms on the flagship were bustling with grim-faced officers, each carrying stacks of datapads containing casualty lists and requisition demands that no one could fulfill. Among them was strategic advisor Naravel, a slender Morix officer with keen violet eyes and a restless energy that made her pace the corridors in search of new solutions. She was younger than most of her peers, but her quick mind had saved Morix fleets more than once. That day, she slid into the War Council meeting behind a dozen haggard generals and admirals. They arranged themselves around a circular table, every seat taken by a figure in uniform whose features were etched with worry. Screens lit the walls, displaying the Kargath Empire's territorial gains. Planet after planet had fallen to an enemy whose unstoppable momentum sapped everyone's optimism. Nara could feel the tension inside the room, like static electricity crackling just beneath the surface. She had Adrath carefully. He was once a symbol of confidence and paternal leadership. Now, dark circles under his eyes betrayed the weight he carried. The meeting began with the usual updates. Supply lines severed, infiltration attempts foiled, entire battalions lost on the frontier. No one dared to speak of a breakthrough or a miracle. The only question left was how to hold on for a little longer. At the far end of the table, a middle-aged Morix in a tattered uniform rose from his seat, clearing his throat. Turin Orel, the Confederation's liaison to the outside galaxy, was known for once entertaining the idea of requesting outside help. Years earlier, he had tried to approach Earth. The mention of humans had earned him scorn. Their chaotic reputation preceded them, and Morix's elders had deemed any alliance with them to be too unpredictable. Now, as the Council stared at the unstoppable red lines creeping across the star maps, unpredictability began to seem less like a curse and more like a potential salvation. Nara stood, adopting an air of calm that she hoped would lend her words some weight. She took a breath, tapping a button on her datapad. A smaller holographic map materialized over the table. "Fellow officers," she began, "we have analyzed every possible tactical approach we can manage with our current resources. We've tried meeting Kargath's firepower head-on. We've tried ambush tactics. We tried sabotage. Each time, they have adapted, outgunned us, or simply overwhelmed us with numbers. It's clear that standard protocols can't break their hold on our territory." She paused, letting the statement sink in. Adrath's voice emerged, deep and weary. "So are you telling us we have no options left?" He looked at her with an expression that balanced frustration and something close to desperation. "We are out of time. If there's a plan, speak now. If not, we should direct all efforts to evacuations and fortifying what little remains of our core worlds." Nara licked her lips. The notion had hovered in her thoughts for months. "We do have one last option," she said softly, "but it's unorthodox. We asked the humans." A hush descended across the chamber. Several generals shook their heads in disbelief. Human involvement? The last time the galaxy had caught wind of a large-scale human diplomatic effort, it had ended in bizarre chaos. Negotiations turned into comedic fiascos, entire delegations confused by their abrupt changes of mood, and yet somehow humans had emerged with advantage after advantage. The name alone conjured images of brash, unpredictable bipeds with unstoppable curiosity and irreverent humor. On top of that, the humans had never seriously intervened in interstellar wars, apparently content to flourish in their corner of space unless threatened directly. Adrath frowned. "We have all heard of them. Their methods are..." He searched for the right word. Unconventional. Some of us might call them insane. Nara took a breath and replied, unconventional might be exactly what we need. The Kargath fight on brute force and perfect discipline. The humans operate on chaos, cunning, and, well, the unexpected. They might have a chance of catching the Kargath off guard in a way we never could. Across the table, an older admiral bristled. But do you remember the fiasco at the Intergalactic Summit? Half the human delegation showed up in flamboyant attire, half arrived as though they were at a beach party, and rumor says they negotiated terms over something called pizza and beer. How can we entrust the survival of the Confederation to such a species? No one else could offer a better solution. The Council's debate continued for another hour, each argument circling back to the same inevitability. They were losing, and time was almost up. Finally, Adrath silenced the meeting with a slow nod. We have few cards left to play, he said. Even if this move is foolish, we must try it. As if performing a solemn rite, he pressed his official seal onto a communique. Contact Earth. Invite their ambassador. We will propose an alliance. His expression radiated resignation, but also a flicker of hope that the humans' legendary madness might be exactly what could save them. Word spread through the flagship like wildfire. Humans were coming. Some officers whispered cynically that they would soon regret letting these strangers in. Others quietly dared to hope. Within days, final confirmations came through. The human delegation would arrive aboard the Confederation's flagship. Preparations were frantic. Crews hurried to restore ceremonial corridors, to secure refreshments that might appeal to human palates, and to station guards who were trained to keep wide-eyed stares at a minimum. There was no telling what these bipeds would do once they stepped foot on Morg's territory. When the day finally came, both curiosity and anxiety hung in the recycled air. The Confederation's docking bay yawned open to receive a small, polished silver ship emblazoned with an emblem of Earth, a stylized globe overlaid with olive branches. As it landed gracefully, the hiss of decompression filled the bay. A ramp descended, and out walked the humans. At their head stood Ambassador Maggie Reed, tall, poised, and clad in a crisp navy blue suit. Instead of intricate epaulets or swirling insignia like a typical Confederation diplomat might wear, she sported a bright floral tie that clashed with the sober atmosphere. Yet she wore it with an air of casual confidence. Flanking her were members of Earth's Special Operations Consult, a group of individuals in mismatched uniforms, some with gear that seemed decidedly non-military. The wide-eyed stares of Morg security made them grin. Adrath awaited them with a practiced bow. He was not sure if humans bowed, but decided it was the safest show of respect. Ambassador Reed, on behalf of the Morg's Confederation, we welcome you. We appreciate your coming on such short notice. His voice was steady, betraying none of his unease. Maggie flashed a bright smile, reaching out to shake his hand. Her handshake felt firm and bizarrely friendly. Thank you, Commander. We're honored to be here. We've been monitoring your conflict with the Kargath, and Earth has decided to offer whatever assistance we can. She cast a glance around the docking bay, seeing the stark faces of Morg soldiers. I suspect we need to talk strategy. Adrath exchanged glances with Nara, who seemed equally unsettled by the human's straightforward approach. They ushered the delegation along a corridor lined with Morg's banners. Even the humans seemed impressed by the sleek designs. They arrived at a large briefing chamber, featuring a panoramic window that offered a view of space teeming with battered Morg's battleships. Turrets and thrusters glowed faintly in readiness for the next assault, though everyone knew how close to collapse they really were. Once inside, Maggie and her retinue settled around a wide table. She introduced Tuong Alfonso Baker, a solidly built man with an almost playful smile. Next came the so-called Chaos Crew, 5 men and women in a variety of fatigues, carrying peculiar devices. One had a backpack that quietly hummed, while another wore a small device like a wristband that occasionally flashed neon lights. They looked more like traveling performers than soldiers. Adrath forced himself not to stare. Nara cleared her throat, stepping forward to initiate the briefing. We are, as you know, in a desperate situation. The Kargath Empire's firepower, discipline, and advanced tactics have shattered every front line we've established. Our intelligence suggests their final push is imminent, and unless a miracle happens, we'll be forced to surrender or face total annihilation. Tuong Baker leaned forward, tapping a pen against the table. I understand. We've reviewed the war logs you sent. Frankly, it's remarkable you've held out this long. Maggie's gaze swept across the bleak faces in the room. We humans don't want to see you fall. We have a certain set of skills that might be exactly what you need. She paused to let that land, a faint grin on her lips. But it's going to involve some unorthodox measures. Adrath's eyes narrowed. He remembered the Council's warnings, but curiosity outweighed caution. Can you elaborate? Of course, Tuong Baker said. First, you have to understand that the Kargath Empire is built on rigid thinking. We suspect their entire command structure is extremely hierarchical, with carefully scripted protocols for every battle scenario. Anyone stepping out of line is punished, so they don't deviate from procedure. That makes them predictable. Nara spoke up. Yes, but we've tried to exploit that predictability with ambush tactics, feints, infiltration. They adapt eventually. They have more resources than we do, so a war of attrition always favors them. One of the Chaos crew members, a woman with short hair dyed a vibrant purple, raised a hand. Pardon me, but infiltration doesn't really work when you follow the usual rules. Have you tried infiltration by, well, social engineering? Her suggestion drew blank stares from the Morix side. Social engineering was known to them, of course, but on a galactic scale, it was more theoretical than practical. The woman, who introduced herself as Lieutenant Go, gave a mischievous grin. Humans have a knack for hacking systems using the simplest methods. Overconfidence and unsuspecting personnel are often easier to crack than advanced security codes. We call it Trojan music. Nara and Adrath exchanged perplexed looks. Trojan music? Maggie nodded. We broadcast carefully coded data hidden inside entertainment streams. And humans have a special fondness for broadcasting music. It's quite effective if the enemy doesn't see it coming. While they're busy jamming or analyzing the signals, our virus seeps into their network. Adrath wanted to protest that the Kargath were not foolish enough to just open a random broadcast. But then he remembered their arrogance. They might well dismiss human transmissions as meaningless. That's part one. And how does it help us topple them? Tuong Baker's eyes gleamed. It won't topple them alone, but it'll lay the groundwork for bigger sabotage. Once we're in their system, we'll hijack their controls, their communications, and feed them false instructions. Then we'll deliver a second wave. We call it the Glitter Storm. The mention of Glitter Storm prompted silent confusion from the Morix staff. Colonel Avila, one of Adrath's top aides, leaned forward. Glitter Storm, sir. Lieutenant Go snorted. Yes, it sounds silly, but we've tested it. We release aerosol drones that coat the enemy's environment with a special compound. Call it cousin to your standard neural disruptor, but milder, more fun. We developed it using a benign Earth substance called catnip. With a few genetic tweaks, we discovered certain reptilian or quasi-reptilian species experience a euphoric reaction. Nara's jaw dropped. You intend to chemically compromise the entire Kargath force with catnip? Go shrugged. It's harmless, but extremely incapacitating for a short period. They'll feel very, very good, which ironically means they can't effectively fight. Their reaction times, discipline, and even their sense of aggression will drop. Adrath, thoroughly unsettled, cast a glance at the other humans. And that will last long enough for us to do what? Exactly. Maggie tapped the table. That leads us to the final blow, something we call the massive rave. A hush fell again. The Morix side wondered if they were being pranked. A rave? That was a word some recognized from anthropological files. A human dance party involving loud music, lights, and a frenetic crowd. Colonel Avila nearly choked. You're going to defeat the Kargath Empire with a party? Doom Bako be met? Essentially, yes. Once the Kargath are disoriented, we dispatch infiltration squads carrying high-powered audio and lighting equipment. We create confusion and disarmament by turning their very flagship into a kaleidoscope of noise and light. Disoriented enemies are easy to subdue. We'll disrupt their chain of command so completely they won't have time to re-establish control. All of this can happen within hours, provided we coordinate properly. The Morix generals looked at each other in a state near disbelief. But no one had a better plan. Adrath, remembering the Council's directive, forced a slow nod. You claim you can make all this happen in about 3 hours? Maggie's mischievous smile returned. Yes, we humans have some experience with unorthodox interventions. Despite his reservations, Adrath allowed himself to hope. Maybe insane was exactly what they needed. Meanwhile, across the vastness of space, the Kargath Empire prepared for its final offensive. Deep within the flagship's imposing corridors stood Supreme Commander Draxier Brunst. He was a towering figure with scaled skin the color of tarnished bronze, his eyes sharp with unwavering confidence. Kargath ships orbited around him like an invincible shield. His tactical displays showed each occupied Morix planet, sending plundered resources to fuel the war effort. He expected little resistance in the next campaign. Morix was on the brink of collapse. After all, Kargath intelligence had intercepted rumors that the Morix were summoning humans for aid. Draxier had dismissed it with a smirk, calling the humans an irrelevant species that specialized in comedic drama rather than warfare. He had read anecdotal reports of how unpredictably they behaved in negotiations, but he saw no real threat. The Kargath Empire had laid waste to advanced civilizations across half the galaxy. They would not be undone by a handful of bipeds. As Draxier oversaw preparations, his trusted subcommander, Grax, approached with a curt salute. Supreme Commander, we've detected unusual signals from Morix territory. There's some kind of broadcast on multiple frequencies, but it's not standard Morix encryption. Draxier commanded him to play it. The speakers crackled, then burst into a resounding beat accompanied by a fervent guitar. The lyrics were indecipherable, but the tune was undeniably energetic. Draxier's ridged brow furrowed. Is this their attempt at a distraction? Music? He gave a laugh that sounded like grinding stones. Shut it down. We have an offensive to coordinate. Deep within Kargath's system architecture, the Trojan music found its foothold. As unsuspecting engineers attempted to filter out the noise, they unwittingly gave the virus partial access to the Kargath's primary network. Sector by sector, the infiltration code slithered through firewalls, rewriting command prompts, copying itself into hidden subroutines. Before long, subtle changes began. A door in the flagship's lower deck cycled open for no reason. Cargo lifts reversed mid-motion, and unoccupied fighter craft performed random system checks. The Kargath staff were confused, but believed it a temporary glitch. Meanwhile, the virus was preparing to open the gates for the next stage. Back at the Morix flagship, the humans pressed forward. Tuong Baker divided the Confederation's smaller forces into strategic units that would remain on the outskirts, ready to exploit any breakdown in the Kargath lines. In a commandeered hangar bay, the Chaos crew uncrated pods of aerosol drones, each loaded with shimmering canisters labeled with the Earth acronym GS for Glitterstorm. Nara watched them test a single canister on a hapless Morix technician, who promptly devolved into giggling and rolling around. It was alarming, yet undeniably effective. Soon, the plan was put into motion. The Trojan music transmissions escalated into a multi-frequency invasion, blasting everything from old rock anthems to electronic dance tunes. Kargath staff tried valiantly to block the streams, but the virus mutated faster than they could catch it. Meanwhile, the Morix fleet approached the edge of contested space, drawing Kargath's main battle group into position. Tense minutes dragged by. The Morix officers could scarcely believe they were trusting the fate of their civilization to these bizarre tactics. After an hour of infiltration, Admiral Helrix, one of Adrath's subordinates, announced that the Kargath formations were starting to respond erratically. Their capital ships accelerated, decelerated, then changed heading without apparent logic. Some weapons arrays powered down mid-calibration. On a half-dozen channels, confused Kargath officers could be heard barking contradictory orders. A hush fell across the Morix bridge as they realized it was working. The Trojan music had begun to dismantle the once impenetrable Kargath systems from the inside. The next phase arrived with a flourish. Clouds of micro-drones, each not much bigger than a Morix soldier's fist, launched from disguised compartments on the Morix cruisers. They streaked across the vacuum toward the helpless Kargath vessels. Too small to attract heavy fire, they latched onto hulls and found vents, slipping inside. Within minutes, bulkheads across Kargath battleships were coated in radiant clouds of glitter infused with the modified catnip compound. The ventilation systems carried the shimmering haze through corridors and control rooms. Soldiers coughed, rubbed their eyes, then found themselves becoming alarmingly relaxed. Some laughed uncontrollably, others danced in place, dropping their rifles. Entire platoons looked at each other in a daze, perplexed by the sudden, overwhelming sense of good humor. In the heart of his flagship, Commander Draxier clung to his composure. But even he felt a curious giddiness encroaching on his disciplined mind. The consoles flickered and multiple screens displayed human memes or cartoonish images of dancing figures. Hardly any of it made sense to a Kargath, but the result was humiliating chaos. The Supreme Commander roared at his officers to re-establish control. They tried, but the virus had thoroughly compromised them. Draxier's unstoppable empire found itself strangely powerless against an intangible attack of music and chemical euphoria. Over on the Morix flagship, Nara stared at the main holoscreen in disbelief. The Kargath ships were spinning or drifting aimlessly, some flickering with random strobe lights, as if they were caught in a carnival rather than a war. Lieutenant Go tapped a few keys, verifying that the infiltration code had spread as planned. "Phase 2 is complete," she reported. Adratha's voice wavered. And now the massive rave? He could hardly believe he was uttering such words in a critical wartime operation. Maggie Reed nodded firmly. "Indeed. We hit them where it really hurts, right in their sense of discipline. Tuong Baker, your squad can go in." On cue, a group of specially outfitted human shuttles, each painted with swirling neon patterns, launched for the Confederation's flagship. They slipped through the disoriented Kargath defenses. One by one, they docked with Kargath vessels, forcing airlocks open without resistance. The Morix generals watched in awe as the infiltration squads carried not rifles, but portable DJ consoles, enormous speakers, and crates labeled party supplies. Draxier, stumbling through shimmering clouds of catnip-laced glitter, could only watch wide-eyed as the hull of his flagship was breached. He tried to rally an elite guard, but half of them were leaning against the walls, giggling as the compound's euphoric effect overcame them. The lights flickered, replaced by pulsating strobes that cast everything in shifting rainbows. Then the music surged, a sonic wave that vibrated deep in Kargath bones. He recognized it as human electronic music, a relentless thump that synchronized heartbeats and hammered away at whatever focus remained among his officers. The infiltration squads unleashed a barrage of deep bass, swirling lights, and even bursts of confetti cannons, ensuring the confusion reached its pinnacle. Across multiple corridors, Kargath soldiers who tried to mount a counteroffensive found themselves incapacitated by laughter or by an inexplicable compulsion to sway to the beat. The unstoppable war machine of Kargath was undone by a kind of unstoppable party. Desperate to resist, Draxier forced himself to the control center. But each console was locked out. The virus had replaced standard interfaces with cheerful pop-ups instructing them to enjoy yourself or take a break. The same unstoppable beat pulsed across the entire ship. During these frantic minutes, the Confederation's battered fleet watched from a distance. Adrath, his arms folded, stared at the feed in stunned silence. His officers cheered, though the cheers were tinged with bafflement. They were witnessing the total collapse of an empire in record time, all orchestrated by a handful of resourceful, eccentric humans. On the tactical map, each Kargath vessel slowed or spun aimlessly, with no coherent formation left. Occasional transmissions from the Kargath side were garbled, interspersed with bizarre laughter and music. Some pockets of Kargath resistance started praising the beautiful colors, uncertain how else to respond to the swirl of sensations. In less than 3 hours from a moment the humans had begun their Trojan music infiltration, the formidable Kargath battle group had effectively disintegrated. Weapon systems were disabled, defense grids offline, chain of command dissolved. Draxier himself sank to his knees in the flagship's main corridor, a swirl of glitter drifting around him like some cosmic snowfall. The unstoppable commander was reduced to panting. A deep bass line throbbed in his ears as Lieutenant Go's infiltration squad strolled in, each member holding strange devices or glow sticks. Draxier tried to snarl, but coughed up a cloud of shimmering dust instead. It was humiliating, and it was over. News of the Kargath collapse spread instantly across Confederation channels. The Morix fleets roared in celebration. The council members, who had once considered humans a last resort, realized that these bizarre visitors had accomplished something unimaginable. Only a handful of sporadic pockets of Kargath forces remained outside the main cluster, but they stood little chance once the flagship and the high command were in disarray. Shortly after the Confederation's victory became clear, Ambassador Maggie Reed and Tuong Baker insisted that this was only the beginning. "We have to consolidate the peace," Maggie explained to a draft, "or else we might find ourselves right back here in a few years." Confederation High Command had no objection. They were grateful to be alive and eager to see a formal end to the war. Within hours, messages were dispatched to the scattered Kargath outposts to cease hostilities. Meanwhile, humans arranged an immediate post-conflict orientation for any Kargath war leaders who might still be functional enough to attend. The Morix staff followed along in confused curiosity, watching as the humans loaded their shuttles with crates of snack foods, soft drinks, and more sophisticated audiovisual gear. A day later, in the Confederation's official negotiation chamber, the faint smell of glitter lingered in the air. Draxier arrived under guard, but found no prison cell waiting for him. Instead, he was guided to a large table set with a buffet of human delicacies, platters of chips, small bowls of guacamole, intriguing dip sauces, and a massive tray of bright orange triangles the humans called nachos. He was still disoriented from the catnip-like substance swirling in his bloodstream, but he recognized that this was not a typical surrender negotiation. A draft stood at the head of the table, flanked by Maggie and Tuong Baker. Several Morix ambassadors and generals formed a semicircle behind them. Draxier eyed them warily, though he couldn't suppress his curiosity at the aromas drifting from the food. Ambassador Maggie gestured cordially. "Commander Draxier, thank you for agreeing to join us. I trust you've recovered somewhat." Draxier breathed, noticing faint sparkles clinging to his uniform. He muttered in a low rumble, "Yes, your tactics. Unexpected." He gazed at the morsels of food, swallowing thickly. Perhaps hunger and curiosity overcame his pride. He reached for a nacho, dipped it into melted cheese, and took a bite. An expression of bewildered delight crept across his reptilian features. "This is good. Very good." Maggie grinned. "We call them nachos. The sauce is cheese, a human specialty." She let him try a second one before continuing. "Commander Draxier, we don't want the Kargath Empire destroyed. We want an end to the war. Many of your people, and ours, have suffered enough." He set down the half-finished chip. A flicker of defiance remained in his eyes. "We are conquerors by tradition. We do not yield easily." Tuong Baker stepped forward, arms folded. "You've yielded already, or you wouldn't be here. But we're not interested in humiliating you. In fact, we'd like to propose a new arrangement. One in which the Kargath Empire transitions from conquering worlds to, let's say, collaborating with them." Draxier narrowed his eyes. "A trick?" A draft exhaled. He had to quell his urge to shout. This was the being who had nearly obliterated the Confederation. But he saw the sense in the human's approach. "It's no trick. We want restitution for the havoc you caused. Yes, reparations, the withdrawal of your fleets, rebuilding the worlds you devastated. But we are also willing to trade, share technology, and eventually coexist. He gestured to the humans. They have shown us that war is not always the best path. Draxiur's gaze drifted around the room, from the stern Morix generals to the smiling humans, then to the table laden with human foods. The taste of that bizarre cheese sauce still lingered on his tongue. A surge of exhaustion welled up from the endless years of conquest. For the first time, he found himself questioning if he truly believed in the Empire's unstoppable expansion. What exactly do you want from us? Why this generosity after we destroyed so many of your worlds? Maggie offered a gentle smile. We're not ignoring your crimes, but we also know that if we keep you cornered and desperate, you'll never truly change your ways. We want a new era of cooperation. In Earth's experience, providing cultural outlets, trade, entertainment, it can be far more compelling than perpetual war. We want to bring the Kargath into the interstellar community under new terms. The suggestion took a long moment to sink in. Draxiur finally sighed. Your ways are strange, yet perhaps the Empire was misguided in its endless conquests. He ran a clawed hand over the table. We accept your offer to discuss terms, but I need to be clear. Some of my sub-commanders may resist. Not all Kargath will accept such a radical shift. Tuong Baker gave a knowing grin. We accounted for that. We've already arranged motivational measures. Let's call it a celebration tour to your core worlds. Our cultural ambassadors will meet your people, share Earth's favorite forms of recreation, from music to streaming media. We'll overwhelm them with good times. It usually does the trick. Draxur, suspicious though he was, felt a tingle of curiosity. You speak of amusements as though they were weapons. Maggie laughed. They can be, in a manner of speaking, but used properly, they bring us together instead of tearing us apart. To many on Earth, a well-thrown party is an art form. It changes hearts. Fighting back is natural aggression, the commander decided. If it prevents further bloodshed, I'll explore this. And these nachos, we want more. He tried to frame it as a demand, but it came out as a half-sheepish request. The final negotiations spanned another day, culminating in an agreement. The Kargath Empire would cease all hostilities, withdraw from Confederation territory, and commit resources to rebuilding the ravaged planets. In exchange, the Confederation and Earth would not pursue retribution beyond reason, instead focusing on forging trade and cultural ties. Some Morix officials objected, demanding harsher penalties for the Empire's atrocities. But cooler heads prevailed when the humans pointed out that ongoing conflict only bred more ruin. As soon as the treaty was inked, literally sealed by a Morix crest and a human signature, Colonel Avila found herself witnessing the strangest scene of her entire military career. Draxiur, the once unyielding warlord, lifted a glass of carbonated sugar water offered by Tuong Baker, tapped it gently against Adratha's cup, and the two leaders drank in an informal toast. To peace, Draxia said hesitantly, still blinking glitter out of his eyes. A hush gave way to soft applause from the gathered dignitaries. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others exhaled with relief. Over the next few days, the unstoppable Kargath war machine was demobilized in real time. On the outer colonies, Kargath troops laid down arms and joined Morix workers in clearing rubble. Earth supply ships arrived, distributing care packages that included medical supplies, foodstuffs, and entertainment devices loaded with popular human shows. Soldiers who had known nothing but discipline and conquest found themselves enthralled by cooking competitions, comedic sitcoms, and the spontaneous joy of dancing. Indeed, pockets of confusion arose among the Kargath over how to interpret sitcom logic, but the effect was a broad softening of hostilities. The immediate sense of relief among the Morix was palpable. Refugees returned to previously occupied planets. Families reunited. For the first time in 7 years, the Confederation could imagine a future beyond warfare. Adrath took daily stock of the new developments, still astounded. The humans had ended a galactic war in 3 hours. He confided in Naravel, I'm still trying to comprehend how a species could harness chaos so effectively. Nara shook her head in amazement. Maybe it's because humans have always lived on the brink of self-inflicted disaster. They learned to innovate in ways no one else would dare. As a gesture of gratitude, the Confederation invited the humans to remain and help shape the new era. Earth responded with eagerness, dispatching more cultural ambassadors, trade experts, and engineers. Soon, entire sections of Morix space stations were refurbished into lively marketplaces and entertainment hubs, decorated in neon lights and blasting music from various Earth genres. Food stalls offered Earth Morix fusion cuisine, alien spices blended into pizza toppings or wrap sandwiches. The results were unpredictable, but the vibrant atmosphere reignited a long-forgotten sense of optimism. Draxler, for his part, did not vanish into exile. With the Empire's political structure changing, he was appointed as a symbolic overseer, tasked with ensuring the Kargath's new role in the galactic community. At first, many Morix distrusted him, but as the months passed, Draxier seemed surprisingly content to guide reconstruction efforts, occasionally participating in cultural events. He was spotted at an interspecies festival, tasting an assortment of Earth desserts and conversing about starship design with Morix engineers. Whenever glitter drifted near him, he would scowl and brush it off, a reminder of the humiliating defeat he'd endured. Yet even he acknowledged that it was better than another 70 years of senseless war. Human tourists and entrepreneurs capitalized on the newfound peace. A flotilla of festival ships, each bristling with loudspeakers and eye-popping decor, arrived in Morix space to celebrate Galactic Unity Day. They put on concerts that featured everything from tranquil ballads to the thunderous electronica that had once disabled an entire Kargath fleet. Morix citizens were at first wary of the flamboyant displays, but soon curiosity won out. They joined the swirling crowds, danced under shimmering confetti storms, and discovered joys once buried under the weight of war. Trade agreements followed. Morix officials found themselves bartering for Earth technologies that specialized in creative pursuits, holodeck amusements, advanced culinary labs, streaming services, while the humans seemed equally eager for Morix advancements in star drive, engineering, and planetary terraforming. Within 6 months, a tangible prosperity began to blossom in the former war zones, fueling an exponential growth in cross-cultural exchanges. One evening, a draft, exhausted from a tour of reconstruction sites, joined Maggie Reed for a quiet drink in one of the newly established Earth-style lounges aboard the flagship. The lounge lighting was soft and warm, the hum of jump drives in the background oddly comforting. A draft sipped a mild beverage that fizzed in a refreshing way, somewhat reminiscent of the catnip fiasco, but without the mind-altering effect. "You know," he began, setting down glass, "I remember the day you arrived in that suit and floral tie. I thought it was a joke, that none of this could possibly work. Now look at us. The Kargath have joined the path to peace. Our worlds are rebuilding. Even trade and tourism are booming." Maggie leaned back, crossing her legs in a relaxed posture. "Humans might appear chaotic, Commander, but there's a method to our madness. We've learned through centuries of our own conflicts that sometimes the best way to outmatch a brute force is to use a completely different metric of engagement. We didn't try to beat the Kargath in a conventional slugfest. We beat them on ground they never considered. Unpredictability, infiltration, and, ironically, recreation." A draft nodded. "I never thought I'd say it, but I'm grateful for that madness. You saved us." She flashed him that characteristic bright smile. "And we appreciate the new perspective you've given us. Working with the Morix, we've learned about unity under duress, about a stoic resolve we might have lacked. So it's a fair exchange." They toasted to that. All around them, other Morix and Earth personnel mingled, bridging linguistic and cultural gaps with easy camaraderie. Over the next weeks, life across the Confederation shifted from crisis management to planning a hopeful future. Warships that once carried lethal payloads were retrofitted into cargo transports or pleasure liners. Many Kargath vessels, once fearsome sights in the star lanes, now welcomed Morix scientists on joint missions. Even the battered outskirts of the empire found themselves dotted with newly minted ambassador outposts that offered education, healthcare, and, inevitably, more opportunities for music and partying. At the galactic level, neighboring civilizations watched in astonishment. Some were relieved that the Kargath Empire's reign of terror had ended. Others were skeptical, convinced it was only a matter of time before the Empire reverted to old patterns. Earth publicly extended invitations to these neighboring powers, proposing trade deals and cultural festivals that aimed to show the galaxy how quickly a monstrous foe could be pacified by a synergy of cunning infiltration and celebratory spirit. The story of the Great Kargath defeat circulated widely, told in hushed or incredulous tones, rumored to be an elaborate prank, until visitors witnessed the vibrant alliance with their own eyes. A year after the infamous 3-hour campaign, a grand event was organized on a neutral space station near the Morix-Skargath border. Billed as the first annual intergalactic peace and party summit, it drew ambassadors, dignitaries, and curious tourists from all over. Massive docking bays struggled to accommodate the influx. Hallways filled with music from a dozen cultures. Lavish buffets presented specialties from every planet. And among the star attractions were the Earth DJ squads, accompanied by Morix performers and even a handful of Kargath comedic troops who had discovered a new passion in entertaining rather than conquering. Naravel walked through the swirling lights of the main promenade, marveling at how different everything felt from those desperate days. She spotted Kargath soldiers sporting casual attire, chatting freely with Morix engineers, occasionally bursting into laughter. Overhead, a giant holo display looped footage from the war's final moments, though sanitized of its more humiliating details. The announcer boomed about the power of unity, the wonders of cosmic friendship, and how a single well-placed glitter bomb could rewrite history. Smiling to herself, Nara made her way to a small corner lounge, where she found Colonel Avila and Lieutenant Go from the Chaos crew. They were sipping colorful drinks from tall glasses, regaling a group of Kargath youths with the story of how they had snuck onto the flagship with neon camouflage. The Kargath youths listened raptly, wide-eyed, as Go described the pounding music and swirling lights that turned war into a party. Their fascination was undeniable. Nara joined them, taking a seat. Avila caught her eye. "I never thought I'd see the day, Nara. Everything's changed so fast." Nara nodded. "But it's real. We lived through it." Hard to believe that the unstoppable Kargath war machine turned docile after just a few hours of human madness. Go raised her glass. To madness, then, and to forging peace in the unlikeliest ways. They all clinked glasses, including the Kargath youths. Laughter broke out, light and genuine. It was easy to forget the brutality that had reigned only a year before, overshadowed now by an atmosphere of celebration and shared stories. The newly minted Kargath comedians arrived then, introducing themselves with comedic titles and claiming that they were going to do a short performance, reenacting the infamous infiltration scene. Nara settled in to watch, half expecting to feel a pang of sorrow for all the lives lost. But as the comedic reenactment unfolded, it was done in a spirit that honored the tragedy yet celebrated the relief of peace. At the edges of the station, Morix security staff kept a discreet watch. Though the overarching mood was jubilant, vigilance remained necessary. Pockets of loyalist Kargath or renegade elements might still lurk. But the infiltration and catnip assault had been so thorough that it appeared the Empire had collectively lost its appetite for conquest. Little by little, the mood of wary coexistence gave way to something resembling trust. Meanwhile, Draxier arrived in a modest shuttle, no fanfare, wearing a subdued uniform. He was greeted by curious stares and cautious smiles. Within minutes, a Confederation official escorted him to a high-level discussion panel, where Tuong Baker was waiting. The two greeted each other with polite nods. The warlord who had once promised to crush entire planets was now an advocate for the new alliance, albeit a reluctant one. Attendees at the summit parted to let him pass, some offering him a respectful salute. If asked a year prior, no one would have believed they would treat the Supreme Commander as a sort of esteemed guest rather than a fearsome tyrant. Baker guided Draxier to the front of the panel, adjusting his own collar. He had never been too formal, but here he represented Earth's role in forging interstellar peace. The panelists introduced themselves, one by one, each praising the extraordinary events that led to the 3-hour meltdown of Kargath power. Finally, the moderator, a well-known Morix journalist, turned to Draxier. "Commander, how does it feel to be sitting here now, in the heart of a festival, just a year after you nearly conquered this entire region of space?" Draxier hesitated. He looked out over the crowd. Humans, Morix, and Kargath all watched him, some wearing bright festival garments or those puzzling Earth suits. "Strange," he answered after a long pause, "but also a relief. I thought the Empire was destined to subjugate the galaxy. We had done so for centuries in smaller spheres. Yet in one day, we learned a humbling lesson. It may be that we had lost our sense of purpose long ago, and this war was a final grasp at a fading ideal." A thoughtful hush fell. The journalist pressed on. "What do you think of the human approach that ended your war machine?" Draxier exhaled. "I despise how easily it toppled our discipline," he admitted, "and I still find glitter in my quarters." A ripple of laughter followed. "But if I'm honest, it showed us a new perspective. Instead of conquest, we can find enjoyment in life. My people have discovered joy in creation, in trade, in collaboration. The changes won't happen overnight, but it's a better path than endless war." Applause broke out, and Tuong Baker clapped Draxier on the shoulder. It was a surreal image. Earth's chaos strategist congratulating the ex-tyrant of an empire. Yet in that moment, no trace of malice remained. Their interactions symbolized the sweeping transformation that overcame not just the Morix Confederation or the Kargath Empire, but the entire region of the galaxy that once trembled at the Kargath's approach. As the applause receded, the audience was invited to partake in the festival. Music erupted from multiple corners. Some stages featured Morix wind instruments playing alongside Earth electric guitars, while others showcased newly invented Kargath comedic operas. Multi-species dance circles formed spontaneously, swirling with color and laughter. Children from all three civilizations zipped around with balloons and sweet treats. The unstoppable war spirit had been replaced by unstoppable festivity. In one side corridor, Adrath found Maggie Reed leaning against the observation window, quietly watching the swirling chaos of party. He joined her, letting the musical rhythms wash over them. For a moment, they simply observed the spectacle. Kargath individuals, once sworn enemies, shared jokes with Morix officers. Humans held up cameras to document the cross-cultural jam sessions. The overhead lights strobed in sync with the bass lines. It was everything no one could have imagined during the darkest days of the war. Maggie glanced at Adrath. "I hope this lasts," she said softly. "It's never easy to maintain peace. But maybe by investing in these shared experiences, music, festivals, food, we can keep the momentum going." He smiled, a far cry from the tired, embattled leader he had been a year ago. "After what your people did in 3 hours, I'm inclined to trust your instincts." She chuckled. "Ah yes, our short, explosive approach to war. It's not always that simple, but worked out here." They shared a moment of mutual respect for the improbable victory. Through that window, the swirling festival lights reflected on the starfield beyond, as if to declare that, for once, the galaxy was dancing rather than fighting. Adrath recalled every step of the plan, from Trojan music to glitter storm to the final massive rave, and he shook his head in disbelief. Who would have imagined that you could incapacitate an empire with catnip-laced glitter and bass drops? Yet here they stood, proud survivors of a war that ended in perhaps the strangest surrender the galaxy had ever seen. Eventually, they parted ways. Maggie was called to greet a visiting delegation from a star cluster that had only recently opened diplomatic channels with a new Morix-Skargath Earth alliance. Adrath wandered through the labyrinth of festival booths, occasionally sampling Earth foods, sometimes stumbling upon comedic sketches or small concerts. He found Nara in a booth that offered something called a virtual funhouse, a device humans had brought to amuse children from all species. She beckoned him inside. He saw Kargath families and Morix families laughing together at the illusions and interactive games. Some illusions played with gravity, letting participants bounce as if they were weightless. Others warped light to create prismatic reflections. The air bristled with excitement, so far removed from the gloom of war. At the far end of the funhouse, a large sign in multiple languages read, "Make parties, not war." He paused to read the Earth text, letting the sentiment wash over him. For all their quirks, the humans had proven that statement had real power. That night, the festival reached its peak. Firework-like displays lit up the station's massive dome, sending sparks cascading against the void of space. The bass dropped one last time, and a giant confetti cloud rained down, shining across the crowd below. Among those shimmering particles were thousands of smiling faces from 3 civilizations that had once stood on the brink of annihilation. In the final hours of celebration, a Drath made his way back to his quarters. He felt an expansive fullness in his chest, the kind of relief that was almost foreign to him. So many nights he had spent worrying about the next attack, the next fleet burned, the next planet lost. Now, he drifted into restful slumber, lulled by the distant echo of music. He dreamt of swirling colors that no longer carried the sting of war, but the promise of laughter. By the time the station's artificial dawn cycle lit the corridors, the Intergalactic Peace and Party Summit had etched itself into history. Ambassadors departed with trade deals and new alliances in hand. Civilians and tourists told stories of the bizarre and wonderful events they had witnessed. Soldiers who had once stood on opposite sides recognized each other's faces, forging cautious friendships over shared interests. And the unstoppable Kargath Empire was unstoppable no more, replaced by a confederation of peoples who discovered that the best conquest was the conquest of bitterness by joy. In the months and years that followed, the galaxy would often refer to the Confederation's transformation as a prime example of what could happen when the so-called mad humans decided to intervene. New myths and legends sprang up, dramatized accounts of fearless humans who soared through laser barges, armed only with glitter bombs and party anthems. Historians debated the exact timeline of the 3-hour campaign, some believing it exaggerated, others maintaining that it was entirely accurate. But no matter the debate, the outcome remained. A once hopeless war had ended with minimal bloodshed in a span of hours. Eventually, the Moritz Confederation and the reformed Kargath territories collaborated to establish a lasting partnership with Earth. They set up joint venture colonies, celebrating the fusion of their technologies and cultures. And though new challenges arose, as they always do in a universe so vast, they faced them with a renewed perspective, one that valued the kind of imaginative, unconventional thinking the humans had brought to the table. For that was the real achievement, demonstrating that sometimes a solution need not be a bigger cannon or a more cunning general, but rather a different approach altogether, one fueled by creativity, good humor, and the desire to see music and dance floors instead of battlefields. So it was that, when humans finally joined the war, they won in just 3 hours. And in the aftermath of that victory, they planted the seeds of a peace built on the firm foundation of shared festivities, laughter, and the strange but undeniable magic of letting your guard down long enough to embrace joy.